All right, we are live again after a quick 1 minute break. And by we, I mean 4 or 3 amazing panelists and 1 moderator. Dan is shortly taking over the moderation here. So you will find me in backstage. As I said it during the other sessions, feel more than welcome to use the chat, to use the Q&A function. As well, if there are any questions that we are not able to answer during the panel discussion, then we will basically take it offline. Usually what we do is 1 or 2 days after the event, we send out a summary email, right, where you can find this session as a recording as well, but also a quick document with questions we were not able to answer during this session. With that being said, I will hand it over to Dan and take a break myself in the backstage area and listen to this exciting panel. All right. Have fun.
All right.
And
thank you.
Over to you, Dan.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone, for joining today for this panel on preparing for the next big thing, how utilities can stay ahead of extreme events. And myself, I'm Dan Gent from Electricity Canada. I'm the Director of Transmission and Reliability at the Association. On the panel, we have Annabelle Rosa, who's responsible for vegetation management and wildfire mitigation at the Seattle City Light. We have Spencer Gill, VP of Planning at Hydro One, and Adit Ranad, Director of Communications, Energy, and Infrastructure at Guidehouse. And this particular session, whether you're in North America, Europe, or anywhere else on the globe, you're going to be experiencing extreme weather, and extreme weather is redefining the way utilities think about resiliency. From wildfires and heat waves to storms, flooding, and ice storms, these events are no longer rare outliers. They're become part of day-to-day operations. The big question is, how can utilities stay ahead of these threats rather than constantly reacting after the fact? In the discussion, our panel will explore the most pressing weather-related risks utilities face today, how those risks shape broader resilience strategies, and what it takes to prepare for events that are unpredictable by nature. We'll look at practical tools, frameworks, and real-world examples of strategies that have helped utilities withstand extreme events. And we'll also imagine what the utility of, let's say, 2040 might look like if transformation begins today. I am not, as I mentioned, I'm not alone here. We have 3 experienced panelists that will be able to guide us and provide information to what I just mentioned. And with that, I'm going to ask Annabelle to kickstart her introduction and hand it over to Spencer and then Adi, and then we'll get into our panel discussions.
All right. Good morning. Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everybody. I am a program manager in the Transmission and Distribution Field Operations Department at Seattle City Light. So I oversee vegetation management, which is our transmission right-of-way maintenance, distribution power line clearance, landscapes, utility, urban forestry, as well as our wildfire program. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk more about resiliency. And with that, I'll pass it over to Spencer.
Thank you. I'm Spencer Gill, Vice President of Asset Management at Hydro One. So I lead all of our transmission and distribution planning, as well as grid modernization for Hydro One. Over to you, Adita.
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Adi Ranade. I'm a director with Guidehouse Consulting in our Communities, Energy, and Infrastructure service, and I lead our infrastructure resilience solution. And within that, we apply both historical weather data and future projections for natural hazards like wildfires, extreme temperatures, flooding, wind events to utility assets, primarily T&D assets, and assess the impact on operations as well as asset performance, and that informs our analysis and advice to utilities on how they can mitigate these impacts through operational programs like vegetation management, data-driven vegetation management, or capital programs like, say, substation flood control or pole replacement. Glad to be part of this conversation and looking forward to it.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll roll into our first topic area, which is kind of the next big thing. So I'll ask this to maybe Annabelle and Spencer. What is the next big thing? In other words, what are currently the biggest challenges for utilities in terms of resilience?
Yeah.
And go
Um,
ahead.
I think it's probably important to start by just distinguishing the difference between reliability and resilience, because this is a resiliency summit, and I think that distinction matters, and I often see folks confuse the two. And reliability is what we've always done. It's about preventing outages, normal operations, normal maintenance, vegetation management, things like that. And resiliency is more about the recovery when the extraordinary hits. So that's the wildfires, the earthquakes, bomb cyclones, extreme wind events, and it's really measured by how quickly we bounce back from those events. So reliability is about kind of preventing the fight, and then resiliency is about winning the fight when it shows up anyway and you can't control it. And so I think there's really two major challenges when it comes to resilience. Infrastructure durability, so how well can your system withstand extreme events, and then operational agility, which is when those events occur, how quickly can you bounce back and restore service. And so I think the next big thing is resiliency, and it's really boiled down to those two challenges, which is durability and agility.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Spencer.
No, I was just going to layer on one more thing, which I think it's also the role of our customers in resiliency. And I can tell people that we know our customers feel a certain way about reliability, and Annabelle's quite right. Like they're seemingly here at Hydro One quite satisfied with their existing level of reliability, but have a great deal of concern as it relates to extreme weather events. And so that is where we in Ontario, not only our customers, but our regulator actually wants us to start focusing on resiliency for our investments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What you mentioned, Annabelle, really resounds with me in terms of the durability. I've often said reliability is the first line of defense. And once reliability is gone, you have to be resilient. So, both of you, thank you for your comments on that. Addie, I have a question for you. How are the challenges affecting the broader resilience strategy of utilities?
Yeah, I think one major challenge is that the new normal is shifting. So a 100-year flood or a 100-year storm event today is different than it was 10 or 15 years ago. And looking forward, it may be different still, more intense in most cases, although there are exceptions. So the normal is shifting. That's one huge challenge. And then number two is both a challenge and an opportunity. How do you take advantage of this revolution in data intelligence, insights, what we're variously calling machine learning, predictive AI. So there's a great opportunity for utilities to take advantage of these newly available tools and methods. The challenge is how to understand your own data, internal data, how to integrate external data into operations and planning.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Eddie. And I'm going to roll over to the next question that we have here is what types of extreme events are the top three in your territory? So, and how do they impact your operations? So I'll ask, maybe we'll start with Spencer this time, and then Annabelle, you can respond as well.
Yeah, certainly here in Ontario, ice storms. We experienced a major ice storm earlier this year. That was, I'm going to say, a historic ice storm this past year. In 2022, we had a weather event that I was never familiar with until it happened, called a Dericho or Derecho or something like that, which is extreme wind, intense wind just blowing through our service territory. So I would say wind and ice are very big concerns of ours, as are fires. And so in Canada, we've had a number of fires burning throughout the country, and in some cases here in Ontario.
Okay. Thank you. Annabelle?
They're pretty similar here in Washington. I will say wildfires are really the rising threat. We've had 2 wildfires come very close to our infrastructure in the last 7 years. And like Addie said, it's the new normal. We've had more wildfires by acreage in the last 20 years in Washington than in the previous 100 years combined. So the risk is increasing, tenfold every year. And I think it's not really about the fire itself. It's also about the community anxiety that comes with that, whether or not we're part of the problem or part of the solution. So wildfire is definitely a priority for us. Windstorms, especially that rain and wind combo that we get here in the Pacific Northwest, that's our operational reality. It's the first week of October this week. And right on cue, we've got forecasted winds up to 30 miles per hour and rain and tons of foliage still on the trees. So we might be seeing some outages this week, and that's kind of just the Washington way. And then I would maybe throw in earthquakes as the wild card. We are on a major fault line, the Cascadia subduction zone. The last major earthquake we had was over 20 years ago. I think it was in 2001. But we've kind of been waiting for the next big one ever since. And I would not say it's impacting our daily operations yet, but we do know that one day it will. So those are the kind of the extreme events that we're keeping on our priority list.
Okay, thank you. They all pose high risks for everybody. I'm going to roll into our next topical area, kind of strategic foresight and planning for utilities. So my first question is, how do you build resiliency when the future is unpredictable and fast changing? And my second question to go with that is, what are tools and frameworks in order to anticipate the next big thing? So maybe I'll ask Addie first.
Sure. So I think it's important to distinguish what is predictable and what's not predictable, to use a much overused terms, known knowns, unknown unknowns, et cetera, right? So building on what Annabelle and Spencer said, some of the natural hazards are predictable, or they're with greater accuracy than others. So for example, climate change drives supercharging of the water cycle. So it's possible to predict temperature changes, precipitation changes with a reasonable degree of confidence. When you start getting into compound events like wildfires or storms, then it's a little bit less predictable, because things like elevation, vegetation, dryness, etc., start playing a role. And then there are some hazards that are broadly part of that same land water system, but not yet predictable. So things like ice storms, where you have low temperature, precipitation, and wind speeds combining to cause damage. Those are not predictable yet. Derechos or tornadoes, I would put in the same category. So there you have to rely on historic weather and still map that and see how utility assets have performed. And then there are some that are even less predictable, like earthquakes. So those are truly sort of outside the realm of predictability. So I think a framework that distinguishes these differing levels of predictability will allow a utility to be prepared for what is predictable. and be agile to respond to a truly unpredictable situation when that hits. At Guidehouse, we use a framework called CHARM, Climate Hazard and Asset Risk Management, that uses a 4-step process from hazard mapping to assessing vulnerability and criticality of assets to quantifying the benefit of adaptive actions. We have seen it being applied to 10 to 12 utilities across North America. But there are other types of frameworks out there as well.
Okay, thank you. Annabelle, same questions for you.
Yeah, I like what Addie said there. I think there is some unpredictability about the future, but the past is not, right? We do have historical data. We have historical outage data. We have historical weather and climate data. And so we need to use that. And we're starting to do that more at Seattle City Light. We are looking at all of our historical outage data. We're looking at all of our historical climate data. And we're trying to identify and predict to the best of our abilities where and when those events are likely to cause disruptions. And then I'll also say, lean on the community and the organizations around you. What research are the national labs doing? What about universities? What about your state and local government? Utilities are not alone in figuring out what their risks are. Seattle City Light has wildfire risk. Well, so does Skagit County, and so does Puget Sound Energy and BPA and the other organizations around us. So there are other stakeholders out there that are interested in figuring out where this risk is. And it's important to know that and to conference with them and kind of work together to figure out what the future is like.
I'll just add on, like here at Hydro One, we've done vulnerability assessments as it relates to resiliency. I think the other thing to keep in mind is in all of the uncertainty, we also have the uncertainty around things like electrification, data centers, layering into, I'm going to say, the unpredictability of the future, but it's also an opportunity. So as we start to, I'm going to say, build out the system for electrification purposes or expand the system, at the same time that we have aging infrastructure, it's actually an opportune time to consider resiliency as we build out the system again, as opposed to this is the only problem that we have to solve is resiliency. And so I think we find ourselves in a position where we have to make significant investments in a network already. So now's a great time to do that. And then the other thing that we are looking at here is, in some cases, you have to change the nature of your network. So in Hydro One, we have a large radial network, et cetera. So if we want to start talking about better resiliency, we actually have to start building more tie lines between the feeders that we have. Again, it needs to be supported by customers who want better resiliency. These would be investments that we wouldn't otherwise make historically, but now get pushed higher up in the investment plan.
Yeah, I would second what Spencer said there. The challenges of reliability, resiliency, and capacity are very closely linked, and the same investment can really sometimes address all three. So it's important to capture those value streams for each because they're all important and related.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I really like what I'm hearing. So I'm going to ask this question here. How can utilities shift from reactive to proactive resiliency strategies? And I'll open up the floor.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to do that. Again, I'm also a former customer service person there, so I don't like leaving our customers out of the engagement in this process. So if I just solve this problem as an asset planner, et cetera, I might come at it completely differently and try and do my best to, I'm going to say, focus heavily on grid hardening. I think that's where data and analytics can come into play, which is trying to assess what are my most vulnerable assets, and I should probably focus there. It's undeniable that, again, speed of restoration is part of resiliency in terms of like affordability, and also customer expectations. Again, we're finding a lot of our customers, in some cases, are starting to take resiliency into their own hands. I think what they really want from us, especially in extreme events like the ice storm that we just have, everyone's got a bit of a sort of a limit, and I think we should talk about that as a standard. Like, what do you need to build towards? Like, is it reasonable to have people out for an extended period of time, and what is that time? And then keeping an open dialogue with customers so they can plan. And that's where we find, at the beginning of a storm or an event like this, a lot of understanding, but that only lasts so long. So it's really important that we keep the lines of communication open with our customers through these events.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Spencer said is really important there, especially about what's acceptable and kind of what current state is. I think clear, honest metrics are really essential. So knowing what your current state is, what is your current outage duration, time by cause, like what are your restoration speed trends, and then what's your performance during actual extreme events, not just normal day-to-day operations. Because if you establish that baseline, then you're kind of able to grow from there. And I think the measurement challenge is really difficult for extreme events, because it's hard to prove value for events that didn't happen, right? It's hard to say, well, we restored it so much faster than we would have otherwise, unless you start with that baseline and you know what your current state is. And you have to have that baseline to point to. So I think utilities need to look hard at their data that they have right now and make sure that they understand their current state before planning for a future state. But then I think pilot programs really allow you to test that. We're looking at some of our vegetation management practices right now, and we have some hypotheses that we're trying to test on one feeder. If we shift from kind of a hot spotting to more of a proactive danger tree removal, and we have the data, we have the outage data on that feeder. So if we spend the next 3 years kind of implementing this new program, and we go ahead and we measure as we go, then we can decide, okay, this worked for us or it didn't. But if you're not looking at your current set of data, it's hard to make that case that your investments are working, because that measurement challenge is a real thing.
Yeah, I would very much underscore what Annabelle said there. Making sure that your asset registry is accurate and that the outage management systems and inspection systems are recording data in a locationally specific way, and those three systems are talking to each other is a very, very important foundational step. And that's going to help in better disaster response, better recording of performance. So you can kind of calibrate your performance in storms of different intensity. If you're collecting weather data through your own weather stations or through entities like NWS in the United States or ECCC in Canada, you can do those correlations if you've done those foundational things right. And it also sets you up for incorporating future projections, whether they're coming from Argonne National Lab or, again, ECCC or University of Washington. But that foundational step is really the no regret basics of making sure that you're collecting data on your own assets.
Excellent. Well, thank you. A great topic. We'll roll into the next topic I have regarding extreme events, and that's building resilience into infrastructure. So maybe Adi, you can take a stab at this. What is the biggest lever to build a more resilient grid in the upcoming years? I mean, is it technology? Is it finance? Do we need more money, or is it regulatory change, or something else? I'm
going to give a typical, I guess, consulting answer. Yes, and right. So those the three things that you mentioned, and those are the three legs of the stool in my view. So technology and data is one. A regulator Education is another one, and then the third thing is, where really the rubber meets the road is there is need for more investment. So and these three are intimately related. If you're going to go ask for more money, your regulator wants to know, are you quantifying the benefits in a way that could justify those cost recovery asks? And what really enables that kind of quantification is technology and data. So yeah, those are the three pillars, or three legs of the stool.
Thank you. And from a practical perspective, what are or were some of the biggest challenges when introducing new resiliency strategies, and how do you overcome these challenges? Spencer, I'll ask
Sure.
you.
Yeah, I think for probably for the longest time, you have resiliency being one of those subjects or whatever that people would often say, oh, it's about, something simple as, oh, you've got to underground it. There's too many tornadoes, etc. It must be, let's underground the lines, if you will. And I'm going to say that quickly spills over into something that is extremely expensive and therefore dismissed. So if we go back historically, I would say like hindsight is 2020, and people would use really, really simple examples. And so I think how we think about it now is, I'm going to say it has definitely changed, because again, it's top of mind. It's top of mind for our customers, and it's top of mind for us. And so culturally, it's about starting to integrate that into your planning standards. Again, we see extreme weather events happen. We see even normal weather events happen, and the vulnerability of certain assets. It's not like we just, patch it up and move on and forget anything happened. It's actually going with the post-event analysis to say, what, if anything, could have been done from a standards perspective to change. So we have this continuous learning of starting to, I'm going to say, reinforce or make our system stronger over time by some of the lessons that we're learning. I do think our regulators, again, and our customers' expectations in this area are leading us to make, I'm going to say, fundamentally different investments. So for us at Hydro One, it's going to be changing the nature of our network, not necessarily making it all harder, but rather different.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Great response. What have you seen work well when it comes to actual adoption, implementing and measuring new resilience strategies for utilities? So, based on that question, I'll ask Annabelle, and maybe Addie can also respond.
Yeah, I think what Addie said earlier about using data is just such an obvious answer here. If you have the data to back it up, it is so much easier to make that business case for more investments. So I can't advocate for that enough. And I do think, another thing that works well, especially in resource constrained environments, if you don't have access to more funding, is to stop thinking about resilience as a new standalone spend. And you don't always need to throw more money at the problem. I think instead, if you can shift your existing resources to better align with your risk landscape, that can be really successful. So, at City Light for wildfire mitigation, for example, we're not spending millions and millions of dollars on new isolated programs for wildfire mitigation. What we're trying to do is embed wildfire risk into our existing planning. So if we're upgrading poles anyways, can we prioritize the ones in wildfire prone areas? Or can we prioritize just doing pole wraps or covered conductor in those wildfire prone areas? So it's just trying to be smarter with what you already have, knowing that resources are limited. And I think the key is that resilience doesn't have to mean more money. It can just be rethinking how you use the money and the people that you already have. But to do that, right, you have to have a clear understanding of your system's health and exposure to evolving risks. So that goes back to what Addie said about use the data that you have.
Right. No, absolutely. I would second that, Annabelle. And getting locationally specific data and locationally specific projections would just help utilities optimize the spend. Maybe it's the same level of spend, but you choose your locations and, in line with your asset replacement cycle or inspection cycle. So if your assets are coming up for replacement, if you combine that with the locational vulnerability data, you would know which locations to prioritize for higher standards. Let's replacing wood poles with composite poles in areas that are going to be vulnerable to extreme wind events. You don't know the extent in a very, very sort of accurate manner, but you know the direction of change and the locational trend within that general direction. So yes, absolutely, I would underscore what you said, and I think same thing with vegetation management and asset inspection cycles on the O&M side. If you know which of your circuits are vulnerable to wildfire spread, then you can prioritize those for before season inspections or vegetation management programs like defensible space around poles.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Those are great insights. And I'm just a little curious, if you guys can share an example of a recent extreme event where you have seen a new tactic or maybe a new strategy introduced, and how did it work?
Yeah, I can talk about this. So last year, just a little shy of a year ago, in November of 2024, we had the bomb cyclone in Seattle, and that's a real term, I guess. I had never heard it before, but bomb cyclone is what they called it. And it, essentially extreme 60+ mile per hour winds. It lasted for about a week. We had it just really devastated the area. But I think we did a pretty good job. We restored almost 80% of customers within 24 hours. And it kind of goes to what Spencer was saying with Hydro One, right? We're continuous improvement. So we did a really comprehensive after action after the storm. And even though, we think we did a pretty good job, we took all the notes we could, we took it as a learning exercise, and we knew that this is going to happen again, right? And so in between then and now, what my group has done is we really dug into all of our historical outage data. We looked specifically at tree-related outages, and then we pinpointed 5 kind of problematic feeders that we found by looking at weather data, looking at outage data, that if it's over 30 miles per hour, you can almost guarantee that there's going to be a tree-related outage on one of those feeders. And so now, as we enter October and November, it's storm season again here in Washington. We're trying to use that information to position ourselves to say, okay, we're going to have 30 mile per hour winds tonight. Are we keeping a crew on the clock so that outage time can be reduced? And then, of course, we have to weigh the cost benefits of doing that. But when you use data to inform those decisions, I think you can get better every time. And it's like that continuous improvement. We're continuing to iterate on it. We also realize we don't have all the data we'd like to have. So, we're curious about, we want to know if the tree-related outage was a branch that fell or if it was a tree outside of the right-of-way. We haven't been collecting that data, so we're starting to now. So I think that bomb cyclone was really the catalyst for us to start looking at this over the last year and continue to improve. So I think we're on the right track there. But that was sort of the memorable example I have, and hopefully we don't experience it again this year, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Spencer?
I'll just add on, it's not in response to, let's say, the ice storm, et cetera. But I mean, we often see storms here. And one thing that's, I can just tell, after I've been working at Hydro One for 15, 16 years now, it's just the evolution, like what technology is providing people in the control room in terms of dispatch. I mean, most of our customers definitely don't know. Most people don't know that, when you operate a system that has no visibility and you're really relying on crews in the field to relay information back, it's vastly different than what people are seeing in the control room today. And then their experience in, I'm going to say, even the feedback loop from pure operations to the planning team, where other switching points would have been helpful, et cetera. So like we're starting to migrate our plans also based on operator experience and restoration. So that is, I'm going to say, culturally part of it, paired with technology. And then of course, like we do a lot of advanced planning. So when you see big weather systems come in using storm predictor tools, we will and we are advancing crews, mobilizing throughout the province.
That's great. Thank you, Spencer. Going now, maybe looking towards the 2040 comment I made in the beginning. What do utilities, what does the utility of 2040 look like if transformation is accelerated today? I'll ask Spencer and Addy for that response there.
Yeah, I think one thing is for sure, by 2040, which is 15 years away, what I was alluding to earlier, that visibility in those control systems, it'll be considerably higher. So we in Ontario are investing in the latest grid edge technologies right from the meter and the systems in between. So we know for sure by 2040, the system is going to be a lot smarter. I think what will also happen, or what is going to happen in all likelihood at the same time, you're going to get a lot of customers wanting to do their own generation. So again, when I said earlier, we have multiple things happening at the same time, a high demand for electricity is also going to mean a high demand for generation, and a lot of individual people are going to do that. And so what I foresee happening is, again, with the control systems in place, the ability for, I'm going to say, for certain communities to island, et cetera, I think is a realistic possibility, controlled by the utility for sure. So I foresee some of those, the pure control going very centralized and starting to push towards the edge. And so some decisions and restorations that could happen, I think, would be helpful as far as extreme weather events are concerned, because again, people are investing their own capital in these assets. And I feel it's incumbent upon the utilities to start to leverage those assets for grid purposes.
Okay. Thank you. Addy?
Yeah, sort of building on that, what I think is likely to happen, or what I would like to see happen, is regulators starting to use metrics like cost of interruption or value of lost load, and maybe even some new updated metrics that combine reliability and resiliency performance. So more data-driven regulatory decision making with new set of metrics, because there's certainly some complicated business models and between different customer classes. So how does industrial electrification or data center demand affect residential rates? These things are already, I would say, active concerns for regulators, and that'll be the case even more so in 15 years. So again, a set of metrics for these resiliency reliability issues, but also a set of metrics pertaining to more sort of capacity investments is what I would like to see.
Thank you. And I have one last question. I mean, for everybody, if you would have one piece of advice for utilities and all the attendees today, uh, if you had one piece of advice that you want to stay ahead of extreme events, what would it be?
Well, I've got a couple pieces of advice. I would say you have to treat resilience as an operating philosophy. So every investment decision, every maintenance priority, every training exercise should be viewed through the resiliency lens. Does this help us withstand extreme events and recover faster? And then I would also say, and I've been saying this whole call, but use data ruthlessly. You cannot address every vulnerability. So risk-based prioritization using predictive analytics tells you where limited resources can create the maximum impact. So you have to be using data. And then finally, and this is sort of ingrained in me, I was military before joining the utility world, but I think it translates pretty well. Train and plan like lives depend on it, because they do. When unprecedented events hit, you need your people to execute automatically without waiting for direction. And that really only comes from repetitive preparation for scenarios that you can just hope, will never occur. So those are my little snippets of advice.
Yeah, great snippets. Thank you. Spencer or Addie?
Sure, I'll add one in, because I know we can't control extreme weather, and we can't probably reinforce the system faster than it may otherwise happen. And I do feel strongly that the open line of communication with customers should be first and foremost. Like, if you don't have those lines of communication open, or the right systems to convey information to your customers, they will not only get extremely frustrated with you, but to Annabelle's point, like, these can be critical decisions. And often, I'm going to just say again, through my experience in working in utilities, sometimes people push that side to the back. But again, it's the one thing that you can control right now, is to make sure that you're feeding your customers the right real-time information, so that they can make the right decisions as well in an extreme weather event. So I think these things have to go hand in hand to everything that Annabelle said, but also don't leave behind how important it is for you to communicate with your customers during extreme events.
Okay, thank you. And Addie?
I would emphasize organizational transformation that really underpins how far a utility can take advantage of the technological tools available, as well as the need to update their processes. So it's finally people inside utilities that are going to make that change happen. So that's probably the note that I would like to end on.
Excellent, thank you. I want to thank our panelists. I see Patrick there. Do we have a time to answer a few questions?
Unfortunately, we are 3 or 4 minutes over time already, and I know that the other panelists are having too much fun in the backstage area.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we have to wrap it up.
All right. So based on what you said earlier, the questions that were asked, you'll get responses, I think, in a summary after the event, is fair to say. So again, thanks everyone for joining. Much appreciated. And I want to thank all our panelists as well for some interesting conversation and great responses and amazing insight. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And as said, we will answer the questions via email later on. Also, we have a closing session in the end where you can ask a few questions to Nick and Steve. They might be able to answer some of them. I will end this session now, and then you will see a waiting screen for a minute, and then we start the next session. But thank you all from my side as well.
Thank you, Patrick.